I thought the hardest part of losing my aunt was the grief, but I was wrong. The hardest part was finding her beach house listed for sale on a luxury website 3 months after the funeral. The listing description bragged about a motivated family seller and a fast close. I sat in my office, staring at the screen, realizing my brother and mother were not just overstepping, they were stealing a $4 million property right in front of my eyes. The vibration of my phone against the mahogany conference table was a small, insistent buzz that I tried to ignore. We were in the middle of a quarterly budget review, and the projection on the screen showed a series of bar graphs that demanded my full attention. I was 33 years old, a senior analyst at a logistics firm in downtown Seattle, and I had spent the last decade building a reputation for being reliable, focused, and utterly unflappable. But the phone buzzed again, then a third time. I slid it into my lap, keeping my face neutral as the VP of Finance droned on about supply chain friction. I expected an emergency from a client, or perhaps a reminder about a dentist appointment. Instead, I saw a text message from my cousin. Tessa Hale. So proud of you for finally letting the beach place go. The message read, "It is going to be such a relief for everyone to move on. Let's do brunch when the check clears." I stared at the words, the blue light of the screen burning into my retinas. The sentence made no sense. It was like reading a message in a language I had only half learned. Letting the beach place go? I had not spoken to Tessa in 3 weeks, not since the awkward, stiff formalities of my Aunt Vivian's probate hearing closing. We had not discussed the house. I had not discussed the house with anyone, mostly because I was still trying to process the fact that it was actually mine. I typed back a single question mark, my thumb hovering over the send button, but then I stopped. A cold, prickling sensation started at the base of my neck. Tessa was not known for her subtlety, nor was she known for being incorrect about family gossip. If Tessa thought I was selling the house, it was because someone had told her I was selling the house. I closed the messaging app and opened a browser window. My heart was doing a strange, frantic gallop in my chest, a rhythm that had nothing to do with the budget meeting. I typed in the address, 450 Ocean Drive, Seabridge Cove. The search results loaded instantly. The first hit was not the county tax assessor's website or an old Google Maps view. It was a featured listing on a premier luxury real estate site. The banner across the top of the image shouted, "Just listed in elegant, gold serif font." I felt the blood drain from my face. I clicked the link, and there it was. My house. My Aunt Vivian's sanctuary. The place where I had spent every summer from age 6 to 18 was splashed across the screen in high-definition glory, but it looked wrong. The photos were too bright, too airy. The worn, comfortable velvet armchair where Aunt Viv used to read mystery novels was gone, replaced by a sleek, cream-colored sectional I had never seen before. The cluttered warmth of the kitchen was vanished, replaced by empty counters and a bowl of lemons that looked suspiciously perfect. I scrolled down to the description, my breath catching in my throat. A rare opportunity to own a piece of Seabridge legacy. This stunning coastal estate is being offered for the first time in 50 years. Motivated family sellers looking for a seamless transition. Open house this Saturday and Sunday. Motivated family sellers. The room around me, the suits, the bar graphs, the smell of stale coffee, seemed to tilt on its axis. I stood up. The chair legs scraped loudly against the floor, and 12 heads turned to look at me. "I have to take this," I said. My voice sounded thin, foreign to my own ears. "It is a family emergency." I did not wait for permission. I walked out of the conference room, down the long corridor, and into the safety of the stairwell. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I dialed my mother's number. Marlene Young picked up on the second ring. "Hi, honey," she said. Her voice was bright, too bright, with that forced cheerfulness she used when she was trying to smooth over a crack in the pavement. "I was just talking to Nathan about you. We were wondering if you were coming down for the holiday." "Mom," I said, cutting her off, "why is Aunt Viv's house on Zillow?" There was a pause on the other end. It was not a confused pause. It was a calculated hesitation. the sound of a mind rapidly shuffling through a deck of excuses to find the right card. "Oh, that," she said, her tone shifting to a breezy dismissal. "You saw that? I told Nathan we should have called you first, but you know how busy you are. We did not want to bother you during the quarter-end rush." "Bother me?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Mom, it is listed for sale, for $3.8 million. Who listed it?" "Now, Ellie, calm down," she said. The brightness was gone, replaced by the patronizing tone she had perfected when I was a teenager. "It is complicated. We had a family meeting about it last week. Everyone agreed that with the upkeep and the taxes, it is just too much of a liability for you to handle alone." Nathan looked at the numbers. "And I was not at the meeting." I said, "I was not invited to a meeting." "We knew you were swamped with work," Marlene said, as if she were doing me a favor. "You are always so stressed. Ellie, we just wanted to take this off your plate. It is a transition. We are just testing the market." "Testing the market? It says open house this weekend," I shouted, the echo bouncing off the concrete walls of the stairwell. "You cannot sell a house you do not own." "Mom, the trust left it to me. To me." "Ellie, you are being dramatic." She sighed. "We are all family here. Nathan is handling the logistics. He has power of attorney for the estate transition. You really do not need to worry your pretty head about the paperwork. Just focus on your job. We are doing this for you." She was doing it again, the steamrolling, the rewriting of reality where my valid questions were treated as hysteria and their massive oversteps were treated as acts of charity. "I am driving down there." I said. "Do not be silly," she said quickly. "There is no need for that. Nathan is dealing with the agents. You just stay in the city and rest. You sound tired. Ellie, are you sleeping enough?" I hung up. I stood there in the silence of the stairwell, staring at the phone. My mother's deflection had been so practiced, so smooth, that for a split second, I actually questioned myself. Was I overreacting? Was I being difficult? Maybe Nathan did have some authority I didn't know about. Maybe I had missed an email. Then I looked at the listing again. Motivated family sellers. No, this was not a misunderstanding. This was a coup. I scrolled to the bottom of the listing page to find the agent's information. The name was Grant Sutter. I recognized the name immediately. He was the kind of realtor whose face was on billboards along the highway, usually accompanied by a slogan about luxury and discretion. He was not a small-time hustler. He was the heavyweight of Seabridge Cove real estate. I pressed the call button. Grant Sutter. A deep, polished voice answered. "Mr. Sutter, my name is Ellie Young," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am calling about the listing at 450 Ocean Drive." "Ah, yes, the Young estate," he said. His tone was professional, smooth as glass. "We have had a tremendous amount of interest already. Are you looking to schedule a viewing?" "No," I said. "I am the owner." The silence on the other end was absolute. It lasted for 5 full seconds. When he spoke again, the sales polish had evaporated, replaced by a cautious, guarded tone. "I am sorry," he said slowly. "Who did you say you were?" "Ellie Young." I said. "Eleanor Young. My aunt was Vivian Young. I am the beneficiary of the trust that holds the deed to that property, and I did not authorize this listing." I heard the sound of typing in the background. Fast, rhythmic clicking. "Ms. Young," Grant said, and his voice was lower now, devoid of the charm he used for potential buyers. "I need to ask you a very specific question, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you the Ellie Young on the deed?" The question threw me. "Yes," I said. "Of course." "Because," he continued, choosing his words with surgical care, "when I ran the preliminary title work before taking this listing, the ownership structure was complex. The individuals who approached me, a Nathan Young and a Tessa Hale, provided documentation stating they were the authorized representatives for the family trust. They claimed the primary beneficiary had signed a power of attorney granting them right of sale. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I never signed anything like that. I heard him exhale, a long, weary sound. "Ms. Young, he said. I have been in this business for 20 years. I have a nose for when things do not smell right. The paperwork they gave me was legally sufficient to list, barely, but when I pulled the actual county record this morning for the final verification, the name on the latest transfer affidavit did not match the signature on the authorization form they gave me. It has been bothering me all day. He paused. If you are telling me you did not sign that authorization, then we have a very serious problem. I am coming down there. I said, I am leaving Seattle right now. I will meet you at the property, Grant said immediately. I want to see you face to face. And Ms. Young? Bring your identification. The drive to Seabridge Cove usually took 2 hours, but I made it in 90 minutes. I drove with a kind of tunnel vision, the gray ribbon of I-5 blurring beneath my tires. The further south I drove, the more the landscape shifted from the industrial gray of the city to the soft, muted greens and blues of the coast. I turned off the radio. I could not handle the noise. Instead, I let the silence fill with memories I had been suppressing. Aunt Viv had died 4 months ago. It had been a sudden stroke, swift and merciful, but the aftermath had been a slow-motion car crash for the family. Viv had been the matriarch, the one with the money and the beach house, the one who held the chaotic threads of the young family together. Without her, the tension that had always simmered between my mother, my brother Nathan, and the cousins had started to boil over. I thought about the funeral. I had stood by the graveside, numb, while Nathan worked the crowd like it was a networking event. He had been talking about legacy and assets even then, while the dirt was still fresh. I had been disgusted, but I had said nothing. I had gone back to work. I had buried myself in spreadsheets and quarterly reports because that was what I did. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who didn't cause drama. And while I was being responsible, they were stealing my house. I remembered the family meeting Marlene had mentioned. It had been scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of a merger announcement at my firm. I had told them I couldn't make it. That is okay, sweetie. My mom had said, we will just catch you up. I realized now that my absence had not been an inconvenience for them. It had been the plan. They had counted on my job, my busyness, my pathological need to avoid conflict. They had weaponized my own personality against me. As I took the exit for Seabridge Cove, the smell of salt air hit me through the vents. It was a smell that usually brought me peace, a sense of coming home. Today, it smelled like betrayal. I wound through the narrow, winding streets of the town. Seabridge Cove was old money and new pretensions, a place where weathered, shingled cottages sat next to glass and steel modern monstrosities. Aunt Viv's house was one of the originals, a sprawling, 2-story craftsman perched on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, with a wraparound porch and a garden that had always been a riot of wild roses. I turned onto Ocean Drive and slowed down. There it was. Seeing it in person was a physical blow. The roses were gone. The wild, beautiful tangle of Aunt Viv's garden had been ripped out, replaced by uniform rows of drought-resistant grasses and white stones. It looked sterile. It looked corporate. A wooden signpost had been hammered into the lawn. Grant Sutter, Luxury Real Estate. Coming soon. I pulled into the driveway, my tires crunching on gravel. There was a car already there, a sleek black sedan that I assumed belonged to Grant, but I didn't see him. I got out of the car. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. I walked up the steps to the porch. The familiar squeak of the third board was gone. Someone had nailed it down. I reached into my purse for my keyring. I still had the brass key Aunt Viv had given me when I turned 18. "This is your home, always," she had said. I slid the key into the lock and turned. It stopped halfway. I frowned and jiggled it. Nothing. I pulled it out and tried again, shoving it harder. The metal grated against metal, but the cylinder would not turn. They changed the locks. The realization made me want to scream. I stepped back and looked at the door. There was a gray lockbox hanging from the handle, the kind realtors used, and on the doorframe, right where Aunt Viv used to hang her seasonal wreaths, A brand new digital keypad had been screwed into the wood. I was locked out of my own house. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I pounded on the door with my fist. "Hello?" I yelled. "Is anyone in there?" Silence, just the sound of the ocean crashing against the rocks below. I pulled out my phone and called Grant. He answered on the first ring. "I am here," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "My key does not work. They changed the locks. I am pulling in right now." Grant said, "Look behind you." I turned around. The black sedan I had seen was empty, but a silver Range Rover was just turning into the driveway. It pulled up next to my compact car, dwarfing it. Grant Sutter stepped out. He was a tall man, early 50s, with silvering hair and a suit that cost more than my first car. But his expression wasn't arrogant. He looked worried. He held a folder in one hand and a phone in the other. "Ms. Young?" he asked, walking up the driveway. "I am Ellie." I said, "Open the door." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, studying me. He was looking for the family resemblance, or perhaps looking for signs of instability. I stood straight, channeling every ounce of corporate authority I possessed. "Please," I added. Grant nodded. He walked up the steps, punched a code into the lockbox, and retrieved a shiny new silver key. He unlocked the deadbolt and pushed the door open. "After you," he said. I stepped across the threshold. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of lavender and old paper that I associated with Aunt Viv. It smelled of fresh paint and chemical cleaner. I walked into the living room and stopped. It was unrecognizable. All of Viv's furniture, the antique sideboard, the overstuffed sofas, the grand piano, was gone. In its place was staging furniture, the kind of generic, beige, mid-century modern pieces that looked good in photos but felt hollow in real life. There were photos on the mantel. I walked over to them. They were silver frames containing black and white pictures of strangers, a laughing couple on a sailboat, a child running on a beach. They were stock photos. They had removed the pictures of me, of Nathan, of my parents, and replaced them with models to sell a lifestyle. They erased us. I whispered. Grant stood in the doorway, keeping a respectful distance. "This is standard for a luxury listing," he said quietly. "They call it depersonalization. It helps buyers envision themselves in the space. It is not depersonalization," I said. Turning to him, "It is erasure." "Where is my aunt's things? Where is the piano?" The family representative said the house had been cleared of all personal effects before the staging team arrived. Grant said, "Cleared." The word sounded like a military operation. I walked into the kitchen. The yellow paint I had helped Aunt Viv choose 10 years ago had been covered over with a stark, blinding white. On the quartz countertop, which was also new, sat a neat stack of documents in a translucent plastic folder labeled Cellar Materials. I walked over to it. "Do not touch those," Grant warned softly. "If this is a legal dispute, you want to preserve the evidence." I ignored him. I flipped the folder open. The first page was a disclosure statement. It listed the age of the roof, the condition of the foundation, the lack of lead paint. At the bottom of the page was a signature line, "Seller, Eleanor M. Young," and there, in blue ink, was my name. I stared at it. The handwriting was neat, looping, and precise. It was a good attempt. It looked a little like my signature, if you didn't know the nuances of how I crossed my T's. But I knew exactly whose handwriting it was. I had seen that handwriting on birthday cards and passive-aggressive notes for 30 years. It was Tessa's handwriting. My cousin Tessa, who had texted me an hour ago to congratulate me, had sat in this kitchen, or perhaps in her own living room, and signed my name to a federal disclosure form. She had committed a felony. I flipped to the next page, a listing agreement, signed by Eleanor M. Young. The next page, a lead-based paint waiver, signed by Eleanor M. Young. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the edge of the counter. It wasn't just the theft. It was the intimacy of it. They hadn't just stolen the house. They had stolen my identity. They had worn my name like a costume to rob me. And they had done it while smiling at me, while inviting me to holidays, while telling me they wanted to take the stress off my plate. My mother knew. The realization hit me like a physical slap. Marlene knew. She had to know. Nathan couldn't have pulled this off without her keeping me distracted. That phone call earlier, the gaslighting, the dismissal, it was all part of the containment strategy. I looked up at Grant. He was watching me closely, his face grim. "This is not my signature," I said. My voice was deadly calm. I was afraid of that. Grant said, I closed the folder. The embarrassment I had felt earlier, the shame of being the last to know, of being the clueless daughter, evaporated. In its place, something hot and hard began to form in the pit of my stomach. For my entire life, I had been the peacekeeper. I had been the one who swallowed my pride to keep the family dinner from turning into a shouting match. I had loaned money I never expected to get back. I had apologized for things I didn't do just to smooth things over. I looked around the sterile, whitewashed kitchen. I looked at the fake bowl of lemons. I looked at the folder full of lies. They thought I was weak. They thought I was so desperate for their approval, so afraid of conflict, that I would just roll over and let them take this. They probably thought that by the time I found out, the sale would be closed, the money spent, and they could just cry and say they did it for the family, and I would forgive them. They were wrong. I turned to Grant. "How do we stop this?" I asked. Grant took a step forward. "Well, first, I take the listing down, immediately. But if they have signed documents claiming to be you..." He trailed off, looking at the keypad on the back door. "Ms. Young," he said, "if they went to this much trouble to forge your signature and stage the house, they are not going to stop just because I pull the listing. They have a plan, and I suspect they are in a hurry." I looked at the folder again. "You are right," I said. "They are in a hurry, which means they are desperate." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. There were 3 missed calls from Nathan and 2 from my mother. They must have realized I had left the city. They were probably panic dialing right now, trying to figure out how to spin this. I didn't call them back. "Grant," I said, "do you know a good real estate attorney? Someone who is not afraid of a fight?" Grant allowed himself a small, grim smile. "I know the best one in the county, but she is expensive." I looked at the $4 million view out the kitchen window. "Call her," I said. "I am done being the easy one." I walked over to the back door, unlocked it, and threw it open. The wind rushed in, smelling of salt and storm. I wasn't going anywhere. This was my house, and I was going to burn their little scheme to the ground, even if I had to tear the family apart to do it. I sat down on one of the staged bar stools and waited for the war to begin. Grant Sutter pulled a thick, spiral-bound packet from his leather briefcase and laid it on the quartz island. The cover sheet was printed on heavy cardstock, featuring the logo of his agency and a title that made my stomach turn: Property Intake Seller Profile, The Young Estate. I stared at it, afraid to touch it. It felt less like a real estate document and more like a dossier of betrayal. "Open it," Grant said gently. "You need to see the story they told me." I flipped the cover open. The first page was a narrative summary, a standard part of the luxury listing process where the agent notes the seller's motivation and timeline. But the words on the page were not standard. They were a work of fiction, carefully crafted to explain my absence while erasing my authority. The current owner, Eleanor Young, is a high-profile executive based in Seattle. The text read, "Due to significant professional demands and a desire to liquidate non-liquid assets for portfolio rebalancing, Ms. Young has appointed her brother, Nathan Young, and cousin, Tessa Hale, as authorized family representatives to facilitate the immediate sale of the property. Ms. Young has requested no direct contact regarding the day-to-day logistics to maintain her professional focus." I felt the blood rushing in my ears. It was brilliant, in a sick, twisted way. They had used the truth of my career, my long hours, my dedication, to paint a picture of an absentee owner who was too busy to be bothered with the sale of her own legacy. They hadn't just stolen the house. They had stolen my voice. They made me sound like a hedge fund manager liquidating a bad stock. I said, my voice shaking, "Portfolio rebalancing? Aunt Viv left this house to me so I would always have a home, not an asset, a home. Grant tapped the page. Look at the date at the bottom. I looked. The intake form was dated 3 weeks ago, 2 days after the probate period had officially closed. They had been planning this the moment the gavel fell. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over Nathan's contact info. I had not spoken to my brother in a month, not since he had asked me for a loan to cover a temporary cash flow issue with his startup. I had said no. I had told him I wasn't an ATM. I pressed the call button. Nathan answered on the first ring. There was no hesitation, no ringing out to voicemail. It was as if he had been sitting by the phone, waiting for the inevitable explosion. "Ellie," he said. His voice was calm, almost bored. "I assume you are calling about the listing." "You assume?" I choked out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Nathan, I am standing in Aunt Viv's kitchen, with the police lockbox you put on my door. What the hell do you think you are doing?" "I am saving you from yourself," Nathan said smoothly. The audacity took my breath away. "Saving me? Do not give me that," I snapped. "You listed my house. You forged my signature. You are trying to sell a $4 million property out from under me. That is not saving me. Nathan, that is grand larceny." "Ellie, listen to yourself," he said, his tone dropping into that condescending register he used when he wanted to make me feel small. "You are hysterical. This is exactly why we handled it this way. You are too emotional to make rational financial decisions." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Rational financial decisions? You have no right to make any decisions. It is my house. It is a liability." "Ellie," Nathan shot back, his voice hardening. "Do you have any idea what the property taxes are on a coastal estate in Seabridge? Do you know what the insurance premiums are now? You make a good salary. Sure. But you cannot carry that place. It is a money pit. We are doing you a favor. We are liquidating a distressed asset before it drags you down." I looked around the kitchen, at the white paint and the fake lemons. "You are not doing this for me," I said. "You are doing this because you need money. This is about your debt, isn't it?" There was a pause on the line, a sharp, jagged silence. "This is about the family," Nathan said, his voice cold. "Mom agrees. Tessa agrees. We all discussed it. You are the only one holding on to the past. You are being selfish. Ellie, you have your fancy apartment in Seattle and your career. Why do you need this place? Just to let it rot? We found a buyer who will appreciate it." "You found a buyer?" I repeated. "We have offers. Ellie, good offers, cash offers. If you blow this up, if you scare them off with your drama, you are burning money, millions of dollars. Do not be stupid. I am not the one being stupid." "Nathan," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "I am the one with the deed, and I am the one standing here with the real estate agent you lied to." "Grant Sutter is a businessman," Nathan said dismissively. "He wants his commission. He will get over it. Just go back to Seattle. Ellie, we will wire you the proceeds when it closes. You will thank me later." He hung up. I stood there, the silence of the house pressing in on me. He hadn't denied the forgery. He hadn't denied the secrecy. He had just steamrolled right over it, acting as if his logic superseded the law. He truly believed he could talk his way out of a felony because he was Nathan Young, the golden boy who always knew better. Grant was watching me. He had heard enough of the conversation to understand the dynamic. He called me selfish. I said, staring at the phone, "He said he is doing it for my own good." Grant sighed and opened his laptop on the counter. He began typing furiously. "Ms. Young, I need to show you something," he said. "While you were driving down, I called a contact of mine at the title company. I wanted to see exactly what Nathan and Tessa provided to the county recorder to get the listing authorized." He turned the laptop screen toward me. It was a digital copy of a property tax affidavit, filed 2 weeks ago. It was a standard form used to update the owner's contact information. "Look at the owner name," Grant said. "Eleanor M. Young. Now look at the mailing address." I leaned in. The address listed was not the beach house. It was not Aunt Viv's old P.O. box. It was my apartment address in Seattle. Unit 402, 1800 Western Avenue. I frowned. I do not understand. If they changed the mailing address to my apartment, I would have gotten the tax bills. I would have gotten the notices. Why would they send the evidence to me? Grant pointed to the date. They filed this 14 days ago. He said, the tax bills do not go out until next month. They did not file this so you would get the mail. They filed this so that if anyone, like me, ran a background check, it would look legitimate. It links you to the property management. It makes it look like you are actively involved, that you updated the records yourself. It validates their story that you are the one pulling the strings, just from a distance. I stared at the screen. It was a terrifying level of detail. They hadn't just forged a signature. They had constructed a paper trail. They had impersonated me to the government to make their lie more plausible. And there was something else. If they updated the address to my apartment, I said slowly, realizing the implication, that means they have my social security number. They have my full identity. Grant nodded grimly. It appears so. My phone buzzed again. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to throw the phone into the ocean. The other part, the part that had been trained to be a dutiful daughter, wanted to answer and beg for an explanation. I answered, Mom. I said, Ellie, thank God. Marlene said, she sounded breathless, frantic. Nathan just called me. He said you are at the house. He said you are threatening to sue everyone. Ellie, you have to stop. You are going to cause a scene? A scene? I shouted. Mom, Nathan forged my signature. He is selling Aunt Viv's house. It is not like that, Marlene said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You do not understand the full picture. Aunt Viv. She changed her mind. I froze. What? Toward the end, Marlene said, hurrying the words out. She realized she had made a mistake leaving everything to just you. She wanted it to be for the whole family. She signed an amendment. Ellie, a codicil to the trust. We could not find the original until a few weeks ago. That is why we moved forward. We were following her final wishes. I felt the room spin. Aunt Viv had been meticulous. She had hated ambiguity. The idea that she would sign a secret amendment and leave it floating around was impossible. Show it to me. I said, send me the amendment. I do not have the original. Marlene stammered. Nathan has it, but I have a scan. I will text it to you. A moment later, my phone pinged. An image appeared. It was a photo of a document, but it was blurry and cropped tight. I could see a paragraph of text that talked about shared equity and family distribution, and at the bottom, a shaky signature that looked somewhat like Aunt Viv's. But the top of the page was cut off. There was no date, no notary stamp visible in the frame, just a block of text and a signature. Mom, this is a picture of a piece of paper. I said, where is the rest of it? Who witnessed this? It was a private moment. Ellie, Marlene cried. She was sick. She trusted us. Why can't you trust us? Why do you always have to be so rigid? Rigid? I asked. I am talking about the law. Mom, the law does not care about family, she yelled, and then she hung up. I looked at Grant. He was studying the blurry image over my shoulder. That is not a legal document, he said quietly. That is a cut-and-paste job. If that is all they have nothing, but they used it. I said, they used it to convince themselves they were right. I grabbed my purse. I am going to the title office. I said, Ms. Young, it is 4 o'clock. Grant said, they close at 5. Then I have an hour. I said, I need to see what else they filed. I need to see the deed. The county recorder's office in Seabridge Cove was located in the basement of the old courthouse, a room that smelled of dust, toner, and bureaucratic indifference. The fluorescent lights hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz. I walked up to the counter. The clerk was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain and a cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. Her name tag read, Patricia. Can I help you? She asked, not looking up from her sorting. I need to pull the file for 450 Ocean Drive. I said, I am the owner, Eleanor Young. Patricia looked up then. Her eyes narrowed slightly behind her glasses. Ocean Drive? she repeated. The young estate? Yes, I said. She paused, her hand hovering over her keyboard. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, but it wasn't the friendly kind. It was the kind that meant trouble. We have had a lot of activity on that parcel lately, she said cautiously. I know. I said, I want to see the most recent recording, the one that authorized the listing. She tapped a few keys, the sound loud in the quiet room. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then stood up and walked to a row of filing cabinets in the back. She returned with a folder. She placed a document on the counter but kept her hand on it, as if she weren't sure she should release it. This was recorded 3 weeks ago. She said, a deed of correction. I looked at the paper. It was a dense legal document, the kind that makes your eyes glaze over, but the gist of it was clear. It claimed that the original transfer of the house into my name had been a clerical error, and that the true intent of the trust was to place the property into a holding company, Seabridge Legacy LLC, and there, at the bottom, was my signature again, Eleanor M. Young, consenting to the correction. Acknowledging the error, I looked at the notary stamp next to my fake signature, Caldwell Notary Services, commission expires 2026. I was in Seattle on the date this was signed. I told Patricia, I have credit card receipts to prove it. I was nowhere near Seabridge Cove. Patricia looked around the empty room, then leaned in closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I should not be telling you this, she said, her eyes darting to the door. But when this came in, I flagged it for my supervisor. The signature looked traced, too smooth. And that notary stamp? She tapped the embossed seal of Caldwell Notary Services. We have seen this stamp on 3 other filings this month. All of them disputed, all of them involving elderly owners or estates in transition. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just my family being messy. This was professional. They had hired someone. Who filed this? I asked. Who physically brought this in? It was a courier, Patricia said, but the return address for the recording is a P.O. box in town. The same box used by the LLC, Seabridge Legacy LLC. I said. I looked at the document again. The LLC. My mother had mentioned Nathan was in trouble. Nathan had said he had found a buyer, but this document didn't sell the house to a buyer. It transferred the house to an LLC. They weren't just selling it. They were laundering the title. Thank you. I said to Patricia, I need a certified copy. I walked out of the courthouse into the blinding late afternoon sun. My head was pounding. I had the certified copy of the fraudulent deed in my bag, burning a hole through the leather. I needed to find out who was behind Seabridge Legacy LLC. I sat on a bench outside the courthouse and pulled up the state's business registry on my phone. I typed in the name, Seabridge Legacy LLC, status, active, filing to date, 4 weeks ago, registered agent, Victor Rusk. The name Victor Rusk meant nothing to me, but the contact email listed for the LLC made my breath catch. Young, Ventures Gmail.com. It was Nathan. He had been sloppy. He had used a variation of his old consulting email address as the administrative contact. He had created a shell company, forged my signature to transfer the house into it, and was now trying to sell the house from the LLC to a third party. Why? Why go through the extra step of the LLC? Why not just forge a power of attorney and sell it directly? Unless there was a lien, unless there was a debt attached to Nathan personally that he was trying to pay off, or hide. If the money went to me, he couldn't touch it. If it went to the LLC, he controlled the bank account. I looked at the time. 5:30? I needed to find Tessa. Nathan was the architect, but Tessa was the foot soldier. She was the one who had sent the text. She was the one who had signed the disclosure forms in the kitchen, and unlike Nathan, Tessa crumbled under pressure. I knew exactly where she would be. Tessa had a routine. Every Tuesday at 5, she went to the Gilded Bean, a cafe on Main Street, to work on her novel, which mostly involved drinking Chardonnay and people-watching. I walked the 3 blocks to the cafe. I saw her through the window. She was sitting at a corner table, a half-empty glass of wine in front of her, typing on a laptop. She looked normal. She looked like a woman who hadn't just committed fraud against her own cousin. I walked in. The bell above the door jingled. Tessa looked up. Her face went pale. She slammed her laptop shut. "Ellie," she squeaked. I didn't say hello. I pulled the chair out opposite her and sat down. I placed the certified copy of the deed of correction on the table between us. "Start talking." "Tessa," I said. Tessa looked at the document, then at me. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. It was a reflex I had seen 1,000 times. When Tessa got caught, Tessa cried, "Ellie, please," she whispered, looking around the cafe to see if anyone was watching. "You have to understand, we did not have a choice." "Who is we?" I asked. "You and Nathan? Or is Mom in on the details too?" "Aunt Marlene just wants everyone to get along." Tessa sniffled. She did not want to know the technical stuff. "Nathan handled the paperwork. I just helped with the staging. You signed my name." "Tessa," I said, "I saw the disclosure forms. I saw the listing agreement. That is forgery. That is 5 to 10 years in prison." Tessa's hand flew to her mouth. "No, Nathan said it was fine. He said because it was a family trust, and we are all beneficiaries in spirit, that it was just a formality. He said he had power of attorney." "Did you see the power of attorney?" I asked. "He told me he had it." Tessa cried. "Ellie, listen, you do not know how bad it is. Nathan, he owes people, bad people." "What people?" I asked. "Private lenders," she whispered. "He borrowed money to start that crypto mining business last year. It crashed. They told him if he did not pay $400,000 by the first of the month, they were going to hurt him." I stared at her. $400,000. "So you decided to sell my $4 million house to pay a $400,000 debt?" I asked. "That does not add up." "Tessa, he needs more than that," she admitted, wiping her eyes. "He needs the rest to start over, to buy into a franchise. He said if he could just get the cash from the house, he could pay everyone back, give you a share, and everyone would be happy. He said you would never even have to know about the debt. He wanted to look like a hero. A hero who steals from his sister." I said coldly. "He was going to pay you," she insisted. "He was going to give you half. He needed the control. He said you would never agree to sell fast enough. The deadline is Friday. Ellie, if he does not have the wire transfer by Friday—" She trailed off, her eyes wide with genuine fear. Friday. That was 3 days away. "And what do you get out of this?" "Tessa," I asked, "why would you risk jail for Nathan?" She looked down at her wine glass. "He promised me $50,000, she whispered. "My boutique is going under. Ellie, I have not paid rent in 3 months. I'm going to lose everything." I looked at my cousin. She was pathetic. She was desperate. And she was dangerous because of it. I stood up. "You tell Nathan that the sale is dead." I said, "You tell him I am filing an injunction tomorrow morning. And Tessa, if you sign my name to one more piece of paper, I will personally drive you to the police station." I did not wait for her answer. I walked out of the cafe. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A notification from my email app. Sender: Vivian Young, Vyung, legacygmail.com. Subject: FWD. Our agreement. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. My heart hammered against my ribs. Aunt Viv was dead. I had closed her email accounts myself. I opened the message. "My dearest Ellie." The email read, "I am forwarding this old thread so you have it for your records. I am so glad we agreed that Nathan should manage the estate when I am gone. He has such a head for business, and I know you are so busy with your career. This is for the best." Below it was a forwarded chain, dated 6 months ago. It showed a conversation between me and Aunt Viv, where I supposedly agreed to let Nathan handle the house and liquidate it upon her death. That sounds perfect. Aunt Viv. The me in the email had written, "I do not want the burden of the house. Let Nathan handle it." I stared at the screen, horrified. I had never written those words. The syntax was wrong. I never used the word burden to describe the beach house, and the timestamps. I looked closely. The original email from Aunt Viv was dated at 2:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. Aunt Viv went to bed at 9 every night. She never emailed past dark. And the phrasing, "He has such a head for business," Aunt Viv had despised Nathan's business schemes. She had called him a hustler to his face. She would never have written that. Someone had reconstructed her voice. They had created a fake email account, fabricated a conversation, and sent it to me now to establish a record of my consent. They were building a legend, a narrative where I was the consenting, irresponsible sister who had agreed to everything and was now, presumably, reneging. They were gaslighting me from beyond the grave. I looked up at the darkening sky over Seabridge Cove. The streetlights were flickering on. This wasn't just a theft. It was a character assassination. They were prepared to destroy my reputation, my memories, and my reality just to get their hands on that money. I dialed Grant. Grant, I said, I need that lawyer's number. Now. Ms. Young? Grant asked. Are you okay? No. I said, I am not okay. They just emailed me pretending to be my dead aunt. There was a silence on the line. Then Grant's voice came back, hard and sharp. I am texting you Dana Klein's number. Call her immediately. Do not talk to your family again tonight. Document everything. I hung up. I stood on the corner, the sea breeze chilling the sweat on my neck. I had come here to save a house, but I realized now that the house was just the battlefield. The war was for my life, and I was done playing defense. Dana Klein's office was not in a glass tower with a view of the harbor. It was located in a converted brick warehouse in the arts district of Seabridge Cove, a space that smelled of espresso and old law books. Dana herself was a woman of sharp angles and even sharper intellect, with a bob cut that looked like it had been sliced with a laser and eyes that missed nothing. She sat across from me at a reclaimed wood table, reviewing the documents I had brought, the listing agreement, the disclosure forms, and the certified copy of the fraudulent deed of correction. She read in silence for 10 minutes. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic tapping of her pen against the table and the distant wail of a siren outside. Finally, she looked up. This is a catastrophe, she said. Her voice was devoid of the soothing bedside manner Grant had tried to offer. It was cold, hard, and terrifyingly clear. I know it is bad, I said, gripping my coffee cup with both hands. No, Ellie, I do not think you do. She corrected me. If a bona fide purchaser buys this house, someone who has no knowledge of the fraud, and the sale closes, getting the property back is not just difficult, it is sometimes impossible. The law protects innocent buyers. If that money hits an account controlled by this LLC and then vanishes overseas or into crypto, you will be left with a lawsuit against a brother who has no assets and a mother who is likely judgment-proof. You will lose the house, and you will lose the $4 million. My stomach twisted. You mean they could actually get away with it? They are currently 72 hours away from getting away with it, Dana said. She leaned forward. We need to stop thinking of this as a family dispute. This is a coordinated financial attack. The level of sophistication here, the LLC, the fake email trail, the backdated notary stamps, suggest they have help, professional help. She slid the papers back toward me. From this moment on, you do not speak to your brother or your mother without a recording device or a witness, she said. Better yet, you do not speak to them at all. You communicate in writing. If you confront them privately, they will gaslight you. They will appeal to your emotion. They will try to get you to say something that can be construed as consent. We need to freeze the process. How? I asked. I am drafting a complaint for an emergency injunction, she said. But before we file, I need to know exactly who we are fighting. We have Nathan and Tessa. We have the notary. But we need to know if there is a buyer lined up who is in on the scam. If the buyer is complicit, we have more leverage. Grant mentioned a preview today. I said, he has a very interested party coming to see the house before the weekend open house. Dana nodded. Go there. Be there. But stay out of sight. I want to know if the people walking through that door look like a nice family from Portland looking for a vacation home, or if they look like sharks circling a wounded animal. I returned to the beach house an hour later. The fog had rolled in, wrapping the coastline in a thick gray blanket that muffled the sound of the waves. The house looked ghostly in the mist, the coming soon sign glistening with moisture. Grant was already inside. He looked tired. The crisp lines of his suit seemed to have wilted since yesterday, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "I am glad you are here," he said as I walked into the kitchen, "but you need to stay upstairs. If the buyers see you, it complicates the narrative I am trying to maintain until we get the legal stop order." "Who are they?" I asked. "An investment group from California." Grant said, "Cash buyers. They are pushing for a 7-day close. They do not care about inspections. They just want the deed." "That sounds like exactly the kind of people Nathan would find," I said. I went upstairs to the master bedroom, Aunt Viv's room. It was the only room in the house that still felt somewhat like her, mostly because the staging company hadn't bothered to replace the heavy velvet drapes. I left the door cracked open 3 inches, enough to hear the voices in the foyer below. 10 minutes later, the front door opened. I heard the heavy tread of boots on the hardwood, followed by the clicking of heels. "This is the main living area," Grant's voice projected, professionally enthusiastic. "As you can see, the views are unparalleled." I moved to the gap in the door. Through the banister of the staircase, I could see the tops of heads. Grant was leading a group of 3 people. One was a man in a leather jacket who looked more like a contractor than a luxury buyer. The other 2 were women in sharp business suits, carrying tablets. They didn't look at the view. They looked at the walls. They looked at the floor. "Structural is good." The man grunted. "We would gut the kitchen anyway. Pop the roof for a deck." "Timeline?" one of the women asked. Her voice was sharp, clipped. "The sellers are motivated for a quick close," Grant said. "As long as the title work clears, it will clear," the woman said dismissively. "We have been assured the family is unified." Assured by whom? I thought. They moved into the kitchen, their voices fading. I stepped back from the door, my heart pounding. They weren't buying a home, they were buying a carcass to butcher. "Gut the kitchen. Pop the roof." They spoke with the arrogance of people who already owned the place. I sat down on the edge of the bed, waiting for them to leave. The tour was quick, less than 15 minutes. It felt less like a viewing and more like an inspection of merchandise. When the front door finally closed, I started to head downstairs, but then I heard Grant's voice again. He was on the phone. I stopped on the landing. "Look, Nathan, you need to back off," Grant was saying. His voice was low, trembling with suppressed anger. "I am doing my job. I showed the property, but I am not going to lie to the title company for you." "Pause. I do not care what you have on me," Grant hissed. "You threaten my license one more time, and I will walk away from this deal right now. I do not care about the commission. You are making this impossible." "Pause. Fine. Friday. But if the sister shows up again, you deal with her. I am not a bouncer." He hung up. The silence that followed was heavy. I stood there, gripping the banister. "I do not care what you have on me." Nathan wasn't just pressuring Grant. He was blackmailing him. That was why Grant had been so guarded, so terrified. Nathan had found something, a past mistake, a regulatory slip-up, and was using it to force Grant to push the sale through. My brother was not just a desperate debtor, he was a predator. I retreated back into the bedroom, needing a moment to breathe. I walked into the adjoining study. This had been Aunt Viv's sanctuary. A small room lined with bookshelves where she handled her correspondence. The staging team had cleared the shelves, leaving only a few decorative vases. The desk was empty. But as I looked at the desk, a heavy oak roll top that had been in the family for 3 generations, I remembered something. Aunt Viv had a habit. Whenever she was worried about something, whenever she wrote a draft she didn't want anyone to see, she didn't throw it in the trash. She taped it under the drawer. It was a quirk I had discovered when I was 12, playing hide-and-seek. I had found a letter she had written to an old lover and never sent. She had sworn me to secrecy. I walked over to the desk. I pulled out the center drawer. It was empty, wiped clean of dust. I reached my hand into the cavity, feeling the underside of the wood. My fingers brushed against something smooth, tape and paper. My breath hitched. I carefully peeled the tape away. An envelope fell into my hand. It was not old. The paper was crisp. On the front, in Aunt Viv's distinctive, shaky script, the handwriting of her final years, not the forged smoothness of the documents, was written one word: Ellie. I sat down on the floor, my hands trembling. I tore open the envelope. Inside were 3 sheets of legal pad paper, covered in frantic, disjointed notes. October 14th. The first page read, "Nathan here again, bringing that man from the notary, Caldwell. They want me to sign the amendment. I told them no." Nathan yelled. "He said I am ruining his future. He said I owe him." October 20th. The next entry. Marlene came for tea. She brought the papers again. She says it is just to simplify things for later. She says I am getting confused. I am not confused. I know what the trust says. I want Ellie to have the house. Ellie is the only one who loves the ocean. November 2nd. The final entry. Written just weeks before she died. Do not trust Marlene's friend from church, the lawyer, Rusk. He came with Nathan today. They stood over me while I took my medication. I felt so small. They made me sign the logbook, but I did not sign the deed. I hid the real deed. If anything happens to me, check the vent in the blue room. I am afraid. I read the last line again. I am afraid. Tears blurred my vision. Hot and stinging. They had bullied her. My dying aunt, a woman who had been nothing but generous to all of us, had spent her final weeks in terror, surrounded by vultures who happened to be her son and sister, Caldwell, Rusk. The names matched. The notary stamp I had seen at the title office, Caldwell Notary Services, and the registered agent for the LLC, Victor Rusk. This wasn't a sudden plan hatched after the funeral. They had been working on this while she was still alive. They had been circling her deathbed, waiting for her to be weak enough to sign, or for her to die so they could forge what she wouldn't give them. I heard the front door open downstairs. "Ellie?" It was my mother's voice. I froze. "Ellie, are you here?" "Nathan said your car was outside." I wiped my face. The sadness that had washed over me vanished, replaced by a cold, hard rage that felt like armor. I stood up, clutching the notes in my hand. I walked out of the study and to the top of the stairs. Marlene was standing in the foyer. She was wearing a beige cardigan and holding a casserole dish, the picture of maternal concern. When she looked up and saw me, her smile faltered. "There you are," she said, her voice wavering. "I brought you some food. I know you forget to eat when you are stressed. Put it down." "Mom," I said. She blinked. "Ellie, please, can we just talk? Nathan is so worried. He says you are threatening to ruin the family reputation." "The family reputation?" I repeated, walking down the stairs slowly, step by step. "You mean the reputation where we bully old women on their deathbeds?" Marlene's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I reached the bottom of the stairs and held up the yellow legal pages. I found Viv's notes. "Mom," I said, "I found the notes she hid because she was afraid of you." Marlene dropped the casserole dish. It shattered on the hardwood floor, glass and pasta sauce exploding everywhere. She didn't even look at it. She stared at the papers in my hand as if they were a weapon. "Read it," I said, thrusting the page toward her. October 20th. Marlene came for tea. She said I'm getting confused. "Did you tell her she was confused?" "Mom, did you tell her she was losing her mind so she would sign your papers?" Marlene started to cry. It wasn't the polite, sniffing crying she did at funerals. It was a jagged, ugly sound. "We had to," she sobbed. "You do not understand." "Had to what?" I screamed. "Had to torture her? Nathan is in trouble," Marlene wailed, collapsing onto the bottom step, heedless of the broken glass. "Real trouble. Ellie, not just debt. He took money from people who kill people. They came to the house. They threatened to burn his studio down with him inside. I was terrified." "So you decided to sacrifice Aunt Viv?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You decided to steal her home, the one thing she loved, to pay off Nathan's thugs? She was dying anyway." Marlene shrieked, looking up at me, her eyes wild. "She did not need it anymore. And you have so much. Ellie, you have your job, your apartment. Nathan has nothing. He never had your luck. We just needed the asset. It was a victimless crime. I stepped back, repulsed. The logic was so twisted it made me dizzy. Victimless. Vivian was the victim. Mom, I said quietly, I am the victim. And you are not a mother protecting her cub. You are an accomplice. I did not want to hurt you, Marlene whispered, rocking back and forth. We were going to give you some money. Afterward, we just needed to control the sale. Who is Rusk? I asked. The note mentions a lawyer named Rusk. Marlene froze. She looked up at me, fear replacing the grief in her eyes. Do not say that name, she hissed. Why? Is he the one who set up the LLC? Is he the one who helped you forge the deed? Stop it, Ellie, Marlene begged, reaching for my hand. You have to stop digging. If you expose Rusk, if you expose the notary, it brings the whole thing down. They will go to jail. Nathan will go to jail. I will go to jail. Is that what you want? Do you want to put your own mother in prison over a house? I looked at her hand, the hand that had smoothed my hair when I was sick, the hand that had signed my report cards, and then I looked at the notes from Aunt Viv. I am afraid. I pulled my hand away. You put yourself in prison. Mom, I said, when you chose Nathan over what was right, I walked to the door. Get out, I said. Ellie, get out of my house, I roared, a sound I didn't know I could make. Marlene scrambled up, slipping on the pasta sauce, and ran out the door. I slammed it behind her and locked the deadbolt. I leaned against the door, sliding down until I hit the floor. I sat there amidst the broken glass and the smell of tomato sauce, clutching Aunt Viv's notes to my chest. And I wept. I wept for the aunt I had lost, and I wept for the mother who had just died right in front of me. My phone rang 20 minutes later. It was Dana. I picked it up, my voice thick with crying. Dana, I said. Ellie, listen to me, Dana said, her voice urgent. I ran the name of the registered agent for Seabridge Legacy LLC, Victor Rusk. I know him. I said, Viv mentioned him in her notes. Good, because that confirms it, Dana said. Rusk is a disbarred attorney. He operates a consulting firm out of a strip mall on the edge of town. And guess who shares the office suite with him? Caldwell Notary Services. I said, exactly, Dana said. It is a mill, Ellie, a fraud factory. Rusk sets up the shell companies. Caldwell backdates the stamps, and they wash distressed properties for families who want to bypass probate or hide assets. They have done this before. I told her about the notes. I told her about Marlene's confession, the debt, the threats, the admission of guilt. That is the smoking gun, Dana said. Marlene's admission, combined with the notes, is enough to get a judge to listen. But we have a problem. What? I asked. To get the temporary restraining order to stop the sale before Friday. We have to file a sworn affidavit. We cannot just sue John Doe. We have to name the defendants. I closed my eyes. I knew what was coming. You have to name Nathan, Dana said, and you have to name Marlene. You have to accuse them, on public record, of fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Once we file this, Ellie, there is no taking it back. It will be in the papers. The police will get involved. This moves from a civil dispute to a criminal investigation. I looked at the empty living room. I thought about the buyer preview, the sharks circling the water. I thought about Nathan blackmailing Grant. I thought of Aunt Viv, trembling in her bed while Rusk and Nathan stood over her. And I thought of Marlene, asking me if I wanted to put my own mother in prison. Guilt, heavy and suffocating, pressed down on me. I had spent 33 years trying to be the good daughter, the one who fixed things, the one who didn't cause trouble. Filing this paper was the ultimate act of betrayal against the family code. But the family code was a lie. It was a suicide pact that demanded I set myself on fire to keep Nathan warm. Ellie? Dana asked softly. Do you want to proceed, or do you want to try to settle? If I settle, I said, my voice steadying, they win. They learn that they can steal from me and I will thank them for the scraps. Yes, Dana said, that is exactly what they learn. I stood up. I stepped over the broken casserole dish. File it, I said. Are you sure? Dana asked. Name everyone? Name everyone. I said, Nathan Young, Marlene Young, Tessa Hale, Victor Rusk, burn it all down. Dana, I will have the courier at the courthouse in an hour. Dana said, the hearing will be set for tomorrow morning. Be ready. I hung up the phone. I walked into the kitchen and found a broom. I started to sweep up the broken glass. The rhythmic swish of the broom was the only sound in the house. I was cleaning up the mess my mother had made. But this time, I wasn't hiding it under the rug. I was putting it in the trash where it belonged. The sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the floor. I waited for the darkness, knowing that tomorrow, under the harsh lights of the courtroom, everything would finally be seen. The temporary restraining order was granted at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. By 10, the digital footprint of my aunt's house began to vanish. The listing on the luxury real estate site was replaced by a generic error message. Property no longer available. The open house notification was scrubbed from the local MLS. To an outsider, it looked like the house had been sold. To my family, it looked like a declaration of war. Dana advised me to return to Seattle for a few days while the court processed the service of notice. She said I needed to be seen at my job, to maintain the appearance of normalcy, and to let the shock of the injunction hit Nathan and Marlene without me being physically present to absorb their rage. I drove back north in a daze, the wipers slapping against the windshield as the coastal mist turned into heavy city rain. I felt like a fugitive leaving the scene of a crime, even though I was the one preventing a robbery. When I unlocked the door to my apartment in downtown Seattle, the silence of my own space felt different. It usually felt like a sanctuary, a cool, quiet place where I could decompress from the chaos of the data analysis floor. Now, it felt exposed. Grant had told me they used this address for their fraudulent filings. My sanctuary was on a government database, linked to a shell company run by a disbarred lawyer. I spent Thursday working from home, staring at spreadsheets that made no sense to me. My mind was constantly drifting back to the broken casserole dish on the floor of the beach house and the look in my mother's eyes. Then, on Friday evening, the buzzer to my building rang. I checked the video monitor. It was Nathan. He was standing in the lobby, looking up at the camera. He wasn't wearing the frantic, disheveled look of a man whose scheme had just been blown up. He was wearing a navy blazer, a crisp white shirt, and the calm, practiced expression of a man arriving for a business negotiation. I hesitated. Donna's rule was clear. No contact without a witness. But he was here. If I didn't let him in, he would likely make a scene in the lobby, and I couldn't risk my neighbors getting involved. I pressed the button to unlock the door. 2 minutes later, he was standing in my hallway. "Can I come in?" he asked. His voice was level, polite. I opened the door wider and stepped back, keeping my hand on the heavy brass handle. I had my phone in my pocket, the voice memo app already recording. "You have 5 minutes." "Nathan," I said. He walked in, glancing around my apartment with a critical eye. He took in the mid-century furniture, the abstract art, the view of the sound. He nodded, as if confirming a hypothesis. "Nice place," he said. "You have done well for yourself." What do you want?" I asked. "Staying by the door?" Nathan turned to face me. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, like a teacher dealing with a slow student. "I came to offer you a way out," he said, "before this gets ugly." "It is already ugly," I said. "You forged my signature. You stole the deed." He waved his hand dismissively. "Procedural shortcuts. Look, Ellie, I spoke to the investors. They are still interested. Despite the stunt you pulled with the injunction, they are willing to wait a week if we resolve the title issue." "There is no title issue," I said. "The title is mine." Nathan sighed and walked over to my kitchen island, leaning against it comfortably. "Here is the deal," he said. "You drop the injunction. You sign the ratification papers that Rusk drew up, confirming the transfer to the LLC was legitimate. We close the sale next week." "And why would I do that?" I asked, incredulous. "Because," Nathan said, reaching into his blazer pocket, We are prepared to make you whole." He pulled out a folded piece of paper and slid it across the marble countertop. I walked over and looked at it. It was a single sheet with a breakdown of numbers. Sale price, $3.8 million. Debt settlement, $1.2 million. Taxes and fees, $400,000. Remainder to family trust, $2.2 million. Ellie's share, payout, $500,000. I stared at the number. $500,000. You are offering me $500,000 for a $4 million asset that I already own 100% of? I asked. It is a fair offer, Nathan said, his voice tightening slightly. Considering you did nothing to earn the house, you just got lucky that Aunt Viv liked you best. This distributes the wealth to the people who actually need it. Mom gets a cut. Tessa gets a cut. I get my business back on track. And you get $500,000 cash, tax-free, just for signing a piece of paper. I looked up at him. The arrogance was breathtaking. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was negotiating a settlement with stolen goods. This isn't a negotiation. Nathan, I said, this is blackmail. It is a family solution, he corrected. And what is the $1.2 million for debt settlement? I asked, pointing to the line item. Is that what you owe? Nathan's jaw clenched. That is overhead. It is the cost of doing business. I picked up the paper and ripped it in half. Get out, I said. Nathan didn't move. The calm mask cracked. Just a fraction. Do not be like this. Ellie, you are making a mistake. The mistake was trusting you. I said, I am not signing anything. I am not selling the house. And I am definitely not letting you funnel Aunt Viv's legacy into the pocket of some loan shark. Nathan pushed off the counter. He took a step toward me, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of physical fear. He was my big brother, the one who taught me how to ride a bike. But right now, he looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. You selfish bitch, he spat. The veneer of the businessman vanished, replaced by the snarling resentment of a failure. Excuse me? I stepped back. You sit here in your ivory tower, Nathan shouted, gesturing at my apartment. You have your 6-figure salary, your stock options, your perfect little life. You abandoned us. Ellie, you went off to college, got your fancy job, and left the rest of us to rot in that dead-end town. I did not abandon anyone, I yelled back. I worked hard. I tried to help you. I offered you a job 3 years ago. Nathan, you turned it down because you said you did not want to work for a boss. Because I am an entrepreneur, he screamed. I have vision. But you are just a drone, a corporate drone who hoards everything. Aunt Viv should have left that house to me. I was the one who was there. I was the one who visited her every week. You visited her to ask for money. I snapped. I saw her notes. Nathan. I know you bullied her. He laughed. A harsh, barking sound. Bullied her? I was trying to save her from wasting that property. She was an old woman sitting on a gold mine, and she was too stupid to dig. Just like you. He moved closer, invading my personal space. You think you can stop this with a lawyer? He sneered. You have no idea what you are dealing with. If you do not sell that house, you are not hurting me. You are killing Mom. What does that mean? I demanded. It means she signed the promissory note too. Ellie, he hissed, his face inches from mine. Because she believes in me. She put her name on the line because she knows I'm going to make it big. If the sale does not go through, if the collateral is not liquidated, they come after me, and then they come after her. She will lose her house. She will lose her pension, and it will be your fault. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mom signed? She signed, Nathan said, seeing the hit land, because she is a loyal mother. Unlike her daughter, he straightened up, adjusting his blazer. We see the judge on Monday, he said cold. If you do not withdraw the injunction by then, we release the authorization agreement, and we will destroy you in court. He walked to the door, opened it, and looked back. 500,000. Ellie, think about it. It is the price of your conscience. He slammed the door. I sank onto the floor of my hallway, my legs giving out. My mother had co-signed. I pulled out my phone and called Dana. It was late, almost 9 o'clock, but she answered on the second ring. He was here, I said, my voice shaking. Dana swore softly. Are you safe? Did he hurt you? No. I said, he offered me money, and he told me Mom is on the hook for the debt. I know, Dana said. Her voice was grim. I was going to tell you in the morning, but I found the filing an hour ago. Tell me. I said, it is not a bank loan. Ellie, Dana said, it is a recorded deed of trust against your mother's house, in second position, securing a promissory note for $1.2 million. The lender is a shell company called Apex Capital. $1.2 million? I whispered. How did he convince her to sign that? Dana paused. The filing date is 2 years ago. Ellie, she did not sign it recently. She signed it when he started his crypto business. The loan has ballooned with interest and penalties. The term is up. They are calling the note. I closed my eyes. Marlene had been carrying this secret for 2 years. Every time I came home for Christmas, every time we had a casual Sunday phone call, she had been sitting on a ticking time bomb, knowing that if Nathan failed, she would lose everything. That was why she was so desperate. That was why she had helped him steal my house. She wasn't just trying to save Nathan. She was trying to save herself from homelessness. Why didn't she tell me? I asked, my voice breaking. I could have helped. I could have, I don't know, structured something. Because she is ashamed, Dana said gently. You are the success story. Ellie, Nathan is the golden boy who keeps falling down. If she told you she bet her retirement on Nathan and lost, she would have to admit that her faith in him was a mistake. And she would have to admit that you were right all along. For a parent like Marlene, that is a fate worse than bankruptcy. She feared my judgment more than she feared fraud. I realized it broke my heart, but it also solidified my resolve. If I let them sell the beach house, I wasn't saving them. I was just feeding the beast. The money would disappear into the black hole of Nathan's bad decisions, and in 3 years, they would be back at zero, looking for something else to sell. What do we do? I asked. We go to court. Dana said, we stick to the facts. The house is yours. The signatures are forged. The debt is regrettable, but it is not your debt. They have a document, I said, remembering Nathan's threat. He called it a family authorization agreement. He said they would release it on Monday. Let them, Dana said. We will be ready. Saturday passed in a blur of anxiety. I barely ate. I packed a bag, knowing I had to go back to Seabridge Cove for the hearing on Monday morning. On Sunday afternoon, Grant Sutter called me. Ellie, I have something for you, he said. What is it? I asked. I was going through my cloud archives. Grant said, when this started, when I first got the funny feeling about the listing, I installed an app on my work phone that records calls. It is legal in this state as long as one party consents, that party being me. And I have a recording from 3 weeks ago. Grant said, it is Tessa. She called me in a panic because I asked for the trust documents. He played the audio file over the line. The sound was tinny, but Tessa's voice was unmistakable. She sounded breathless, high-pitched. Grant, you have to just list it. Tessa's voice whined. Nathan says the papers are coming. We need to get the photos up. If we do not show activity by the end of the month, the investors get spooked. I cannot list without proof of authority. Tessa, Grant's voice replied, calm and firm. Where is Ellie? Why haven't I spoken to her? She is having a breakdown. Tessa improvised wildly. She is in a facility. That is why we are handling it. She told Nathan to just get rid of the house because it reminds her of the aunt. Please, Grant, just do it as a favor to the family. The recording ended. She said I was in a facility? I asked, my voice flat. She lied. Grant said, specifically, she lied about your capacity to consent. That undermines any document they try to produce claiming you signed it. If you were in a facility and having a breakdown, how could you sign a lucid authorization agreement? It is leverage. I said, it is a grenade, Grant corrected. Give it to Dana. I drove back to Seabridge Cove on Sunday night. I didn't go to the beach house. I didn't want to run into Marlene or Nathan. I checked into a generic motel on the highway. the kind with flickering neon signs and thin walls. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing what I would say to the judge. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nathan's face in my hallway. "You selfish bitch." The next morning, the sky was a bruised purple. I dressed in my most severe charcoal suit, my armor. I met Dana outside the county courthouse at 8:30. She looked impeccable, holding a briefcase that looked like it contained nuclear codes. "Ready?" she asked. "No," I said. "Let's do it." We walked into the courtroom. It was a small room, wood-paneled and smelling of floor wax. On the other side of the aisle, they were already waiting. It was a tableau of family unity. Nathan sat in the middle, wearing the same navy blazer, looking solemn and responsible. To his left was Tessa, wearing a modest black dress and pearls, looking like a grieving relative. And to his right was my mother. Marlene looked 20 years older than she had last month. She was pale, her hands clasping a tissue in her lap. She was staring at the table, refusing to lift her head. Standing behind them was a man I assumed was their lawyer. He was slick, with gelled hair and a suit that was a little too shiny. This wasn't a high-end litigator. This was a strip mall shark. The bailiff called the case. Young v. Young, et al. We stood up. "Your Honor," Dana began, her voice ringing clear. "We are seeking a preliminary injunction to halt the sale of the property at 450 Ocean Drive. My client, Eleanor Young, is the sole legal owner. The defendants have engaged in a sophisticated scheme of forgery and identity theft to list and sell this property without her knowledge." The judge, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses and a tired expression, looked over his spectacles at the defense table. "Mr. Abrahams?" the judge asked. The shiny-suited lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, this is a tragic misunderstanding," he said. His voice was oily. "The plaintiff, Ms. Young, is suffering from, let's call it, seller's remorse. She fully authorized this sale. This is a family dispute that belongs in mediation, not court." He picked up a document from his table. "We have here a family authorization agreement, signed by the plaintiff 2 months ago, granting Mr. Nathan Young full authority to manage and liquidate the estate assets for the benefit of the family trust." He handed the document to the bailiff, who brought it to the judge. Dana objected immediately. "Your Honor, we have not seen this document, and based on the pattern of behavior established by the defendants, we have every reason to believe it is a forgery." The judge looked at the paper. Then he looked at me. "Ms. Young, is this your signature?" he asked. I walked to the witness stand. The bailiff held the paper out. I looked at it. It was a complex legal document, dated the day after Aunt Viv's funeral, and at the bottom, there was a signature. It was a perfect replica of my signature, much better than the one on the disclosure forms. It had the slight hook on the E that I only used when signing official contracts. I felt a chill. To get it this perfect. They must have traced it from my actual employment contract or a check I had written. "It is a forgery." "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. "I did not sign this. On the date this document was allegedly created, I was in Seattle. I was not with my family." "Mr. Abraham smiled. "We have a witness. Your Honor, Ms. Tessa Hale witnessed the signing." I looked at Tessa. She was staring at her hands, trembling slightly. Dana stepped in. "Your Honor, we have a recording of Ms. Hale from 3 weeks ago stating that the plaintiff was in a mental facility and unable to be contacted. If Miss Young was incapacitated, how could she have signed this agreement? And if she signed it 2 months ago, why did Ms. Hale lie to the listing agent 3 weeks ago?" The judge frowned. He looked at Tessa, who seemed ready to bolt from the room. He set the paper down. "This court is not a handwriting analysis lab," the judge said gruffly. "Given the conflicting evidence and the serious allegations of fraud, I am granting the temporary injunction. The sale is halted." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "However," the judge continued, looking at Nathan, "if this document is valid, Mr. Young, you have a right to execute your duties. I am ordering a forensic document examination. We will reconvene in 10 days for an evidentiary hearing. If I find that this signature is genuine, Ms. Young, you will be liable for the defendant's legal fees and damages for the lost sale. It wasn't a total victory. It was a pause button. Court is adjourned, the judge said. I walked back to Dana. 10 days. Dana whispered, that gives us time to subpoena the notary and get the forensics. We can win this. I turned to leave. My family was gathering their things. Nathan was glaring at me, his face red with suppressed rage. Tessa was crying silently. Marlene stood up. She looked at me across the aisle. Her eyes were hollow. I walked toward the exit. Marlene moved to intercept me. Dana put a hand out to stop her, but Marlene ignored it. She walked right up to me. She didn't look angry. She looked terrified. Ellie, she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. You have to stop. I can't stop. Mom, I said, you stole my house. It is not about the house anymore, Marlene hissed. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You do not understand. You do not know who Nathan owes. I pulled my arm away. Apex Capital, I said. I know about the loan. Mom. Marlene shook her head rapidly. No, not just Apex. That is the paper debt. There is other debt, unrecorded debt. She looked over her shoulder at Nathan, who was talking angrily to his lawyer. He promised them the money by Friday. Marlene whispered, tears spilling over. If the sale doesn't happen, they are not going to sue him. Ellie, they are going to hurt him, and they know where you live. A cold shiver went down my spine. Who? I asked. Who are they? Marlene opened her mouth to speak, but Nathan turned around. Mom, he barked. Let's go. Marlene flinched. She looked at me one last time, a look of pure, desperate pleading, and then turned and followed her son. I watched them walk out of the courtroom. They looked like a normal family, a mother, a son, a cousin, but the shadow trailing behind them was long and dark. Dana touched my shoulder. What did she say? Dana asked. She said the deadline wasn't for the bank, I said, staring at the empty door. She said they know where I live. Dana's face hardened. We need to get you out of that motel, she said, and we need to get security for the beach house. This isn't a legal battle anymore. Ellie, I nodded. Marlene was right about one thing. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about survival. And as I walked out into the harsh sunlight of the courthouse steps, I realized that the hardest part wasn't fighting my enemy. It was realizing that my enemy was sleeping in my childhood bedroom, and he had brought wolves to the door. The conference room in Dana Klein's office had become my command center. The mahogany table was buried under stacks of paper, forensic reports, and timeline charts that looked less like a legal defense and more like a homicide investigation. It had been 4 days since the injunction hearing, and the silence from my family was deafening. They had not called. They had not texted. They had simply retreated into the shadows, presumably to regroup. But while they were quiet, the data was screaming. Dana walked in, dropping a heavy binder onto the table. The thud echoed in the room. We got the metadata analysis back from the forensic expert, she said, her voice grim but satisfied. It is exactly what we suspected. It is sloppy. Ellie, arrogant and sloppy. I opened the binder. The first page was a summary of the family authorization agreement, the document Nathan's lawyer had waved around in court like a holy relic. Look at the creation log, Dana said, pointing to a column of timestamps. Created, October 24th, 11:42 p.m. Device, MacBook Pro. User, N. Young Admin. Modified, October 24th, 11:55 p.m. Exported to PDF, October 25th, 12:10 a.m., October 24th. I said, calculating. That was 2 months ago. That matches the date on the signature. Keep reading. Dana said. I looked at the next line. Batch export ID 4492A. Then I looked at the next document in the binder. It was the Aunt Viv email thread, the one where I supposedly agreed to give Nathan control. Created, October 24th, 11:45 p.m. Device, MacBook Pro. User, N. Young Admin. They were created 3 minutes apart. I whispered, "Exactly," Dana said, pulling out a chair. "They didn't have these conversations with you over months. They sat down one night, probably late at night, given the timestamps, and manufactured the entire history of your consent in a single session. They wrote the script, forged the signatures, and exported the files all at once. It is digital fabrication on an industrial scale." "And the email?" I asked. "The one from Aunt Viv?" Dana flipped to the back of the binder. "We traced the IP address of the sender." She said, "The email address vyung@legacygmail.com was accessed from a static IP in downtown Seattle, specifically from an office building on 4th Avenue. I knew that address. That is the WeWork space where Nathan rents a desk." I said, "That is his startup's headquarters." "So," Dana said, leaning back, "unless your 70-year-old aunt drove to your brother's co-working space in the middle of the night, hacked his Wi-Fi, and sent an email praising his business acumen, we have proof that Nathan sent it himself." I stared at the report. It was irrefutable. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was a recorded fact. My brother had sat at his computer, likely drinking coffee or whiskey, and methodically typed out words in a dead woman's voice to steal from his sister. "But that is not the best part," Dana said, a shark-like smile touching her lips. "We looked at the trust amendment, the one Marlene sent you a picture of, the one that supposedly cut you out." I held my breath. That was the document that scared me the most. If Aunt Viv had actually signed it, even under duress, it could invalidate everything. "It is defective," Dana said. "Defective?" I asked. "In this state, for a trust amendment to be valid, it must be signed by the grantor and witnessed by 2 disinterested parties, or notarized," Dana explained. We finally got a copy of the full document from the title company's rejected pile. She slid a single sheet of paper toward me. It was the amendment. It had Aunt Viv's shaky signature. It had Nathan's signature, but the lines for the witnesses were blank, and the notary block at the bottom? It was stamped, but the date was missing. They forgot to date the notary stamp. I said, looking at the empty line. "They were rushing." Dana said, "They got her to sign it, probably while she was medicated or confused. But they didn't have witnesses present because they didn't want anyone to see what they were doing. They tried to fix it later with the stamp. But Caldwell, the crooked notary, missed a spot. Legally? This piece of paper is worthless. It is a napkin doodle. You are still the sole beneficiary. Ellie, the trust stands." I felt a weight lift off my chest, a physical release of tension that left me lightheaded. "So we win," I said. "Legally?" "Yes," Dana said. "We have enough here to crush them in the evidentiary hearing next week. We can prove forgery, fraud, and an invalid amendment. But Ellie?" She hesitated, her expression darkening. "Winning in court creates a cornered animal, and cornered animals bite. I needed fresh air." I left Dana's office and walked down to the harbor, watching the fishing boats bob in the gray water. The legal victory felt abstract. The betrayal felt visceral. My phone buzzed. It was Grant Sutter. "I have not heard from you in 2 days," he said. "I was getting worried. I am fine." "Grant," I said, leaning against the railing of the boardwalk. "We found the evidence. The metadata proves Nathan faked everything." Grant let out a long exhale. "Thank God. I wanted to ask you something," I said, watching a seagull dive into the water. "You said you had a bad feeling from the start. You said the paperwork was thin. Why did you take the listing?" "Grant, you are the biggest agent in town. You didn't need the commission." There was a silence on the line. "Grant?" "I was afraid. Ellie," he said quietly. "Afraid of Nathan?" I asked. "He is a failed entrepreneur in a blazer. He is not exactly terrifying, not physically," Grant said, "but in my business, reputation is everything." When I hesitated, Nathan and Tessa came to my office. They didn't threaten to beat me up. They threatened to destroy my brand. They had a drafted press release claiming I was discriminating against a grieving family. They had draft reviews ready to go on Zillow, Google, Yelp, hundreds of them, bots presumably, calling me a scam artist. A thief? A predator? I closed my eyes. It was the modern weapon of choice. Weaponized noise. I spent 30 years building this agency, Grant said, his voice sounding small. One viral post, one coordinated review bomb, and it is gone. Clients get spooked. Listings get pulled. They knew exactly where to hit me. So I took the listing, hoping the title company would be the bad guys and kill the deal so I didn't have to. I am sorry. Ellie, I was a coward. You were a hostage. I said, just like Aunt Viv. It made me realize how calculated this was. Nathan hadn't just relied on family loyalty. He had identified the weak point of every person in the chain and applied precisely the right amount of pressure. For Grant, it was his reputation. For Marlene, it was her shame. And for Tessa? I looked at the time. It was 2 p.m. Tessa would be at her boutique, the Gilded Cage, a shop that sold overpriced candles and linen tunics to tourists. I hung up with Grant and walked toward Main Street. The shop was empty when I walked in. The bell above the door chimed cheerfully, a stark contrast to the tension in the room. Tessa was behind the counter, scrolling on her phone. When she looked up and saw me, she dropped the phone. It clattered onto the glass countertop. "Ellie," she whispered. I walked up to the counter. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I placed the forensic report on the glass between us, right next to a display of organic soaps. I know. "Tessa," I said softly. She looked at the report, seeing the timestamps, the usernames. Her face crumbled. "He told me it was untraceable." She sobbed. "He said he scrubbed the metadata. He lied." I said, "He lies about everything." "Tessa, you know that." Tessa put her face in her hands. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry." "Why?" I asked. "That is the only thing I don't understand. I know why Nathan did it. He owes money to dangerous people. I know why Mom did it. She co-signed his loans. But you? You were always the neutral one. Tessa, why did you sign my name?" Tessa looked up, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. $30,000, she whispered. "What?" "That is what he promised me," she said. 30,000. That is my rent arrears for the shop. "The landlord gave me an eviction notice last month," Nathan said. "He said if I just helped with the admin, he would cut me a check from the sale proceeds. I could keep the shop. I could keep pretending I was successful." I looked around the boutique. It was filled with beautiful, useless things. And for this, for a few more months of selling scented candles, she had committed a felony. "He used you." "Tessa," I said, "he knew you were desperate, and he bought you for pennies on the dollar." "I know," she wept. I tried to back out. "When you came to town, I called him. I told him we had to stop. But he said it was too late. He said if I flipped, he would tell the police I was the mastermind. He said he has emails proving I sent the documents." I shook my head. "He set you up as the fall guy." "What do I do?" she begged, reaching across the counter. "Please, Ellie, do not send me to jail. I have kids." "Then stop lying." I said, "You are going to write a statement. You are going to detail exactly what Nathan asked you to do, and you are going to give it to my lawyer. If you cooperate, maybe Dana can keep you out of prison. But if you stick to Nathan's story, you go down with him. I will do it." She nodded frantically. "I will do anything." I walked out of the shop. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sick. My family was cheap. Their loyalty had a price tag, and it was terrifyingly low. My next stop was the county records office, but not to see the clerk. I sat in my car in the parking lot and called the number Dana had given me for a private investigator she used for background checks. "I need to know about Marlene Young's movements." I told him, specifically, any visits to an office complex on State Street in the last 3 months. "I already have that," the investigator said. "Dana asked me to run the license plate recognition data for your mother's car yesterday, and she was there 5 times, he said. 5 separate visits to the complex that houses Caldwell Notary Services and Victor Rusk's consulting firm. The visit started in September, a month before your aunt died. September. Marlene had told me she thought it was just paperwork. She had played the confused elderly mother who just wanted everyone to get along, but you don't go to a fraud factory 5 times by accident, you go there to plan. I realized then that my mother's denial wasn't a defense mechanism, it was a weapon. She used her fragility, her age, and her status as a mom to deflect suspicion. She let Nathan be the bad guy, the aggressive one, while she quietly signed the papers in the background, knowing that if they got caught, everyone would blame the ambitious son and pity the confused mother. She was smarter than Nathan, and that made her infinitely more dangerous. I drove back to Dana's office. Dana was on the phone when I walked in, her face pale. She held up a finger, signaling me to wait. "Yes, I understand," she said into the receiver. "Send me the file." She hung up and looked at me. "We found Victor Rusk." She said, "Is he arrested?" I asked. "No," Dana said, "but we know who he is. He is not just a disbarred lawyer. He is a specialist. He works for a syndicate that targets distressed properties along the coast. They find families with internal conflict, identify the weak link, usually a debtor like Nathan, and offer a solution. They facilitate the transfer of the deed to an LLC, sell the property quickly for cash, and then disappear." "So Nathan didn't find Rusk?" I said. "Rusk found Nathan." "Exactly," Dana said. "They are vultures. They saw the obituary for your aunt. They saw the lien on your mother's house, and they made contact. Nathan is just the puppet. Rusk is the one pulling the strings. And Ellie? Rusk doesn't like losing." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we need to be careful." Dana said, "These people are not playing for family legacy. They are playing for a $4 million payday. If the injunction holds, they lose their commission. They lose their investment in the staging, the filings, the bribes. They are going to escalate." I thought about the unrecorded debt Marlene had whispered about. "They are going to hurt him. I have to go to the house." I said suddenly. "What?" "No," Dana said, standing up. "That is the worst place you can be. I left my laptop there." I lied. "It has the original scans of the aunt's letters. If they break in and take it, we lose our baseline for the handwriting analysis." It was a stupid lie, but I needed to go. I needed to see the place one more time before the deposition tomorrow. I needed to stand in the center of the storm and remind myself what I was fighting for, because right now, looking at the wreckage of my family, I was starting to wonder if the house was worth it. "Take the investigator with you," Dana ordered. "I will be fine," I said. "It is daylight. I will be in and out in 10 minutes. I drove to Seabridge Cove. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the highway. By the time I turned onto Ocean Drive, the light was fading into a deep, indigo twilight. The house sat on the bluff, dark and silent. The coming soon sign had been pulled up and thrown into the bushes, likely by Grant or a frustrated Nathan. I pulled into the driveway. My heart was beating a strange, erratic rhythm against my ribs. I walked up to the front door. The lockbox was still there, but I had the key Grant had given me. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was cold. The heating had been turned off. The smell of the staging furniture, chemical and new, was starting to fade, replaced by the underlying scent of damp and old wood that was the true smell of the house. I walked through the living room. The shadows of the furniture stretched across the floor like grasping fingers. I went to the kitchen. I checked the counters. Nothing had changed. The fake lemons were still there, gathering dust. I turned to leave, satisfied that the house was secure. Then I felt a draft. A cold breeze was blowing through the house, carrying the scent of the ocean. I froze. I had closed the front door behind me. I turned slowly toward the back of the house. The sliding glass door that led to the deck was open. The curtains were billowing inward, ghost-like in the gloom. I hadn't opened that door. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to turn around, get in my car, and drive until I hit Seattle. But I didn't. I walked toward the open door. I stepped into the dining area. On the dining table, which had been empty when I was here last, sat a single object, a bright red folder. It wasn't a legal folder. It was a cheap, plastic school folder. I walked over to it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lift the cover. Inside was a single document titled Settlement Agreement and Mutual Release. I scanned the text. It was a formal agreement. It offered me $700,000, $200,000 more than Nathan's last offer, in exchange for an immediate withdrawal of the injunction and a transfer of the deed to Seabridge Legacy LLC. But it wasn't the text that made my blood freeze. Paperclipped to the back of the document was a photograph. It was a grainy, high-zoom photo. It showed a woman walking up the steps of the county courthouse. She was wearing a charcoal suit. She was looking down at her phone. It was me. The photo was dated yesterday. I looked closer. In the background of the photo, across the street, a black SUV was visible. The window was rolled down, just an inch. They were watching me. They had followed me to the courthouse. They had followed me here. I looked at the open door. The darkness outside seemed to press against the glass, heavy and watching. I wasn't alone. Maybe they weren't in the house right now, but they were close. They had come in, left the message, and vanished, leaving the door open to let me know that my locks didn't matter, that my injunction didn't matter. I looked back at the folder. There was a sticky note attached to the photo. It had no words, just a number written in black marker, $700,000. And below it, a time, midnight. They were giving me a deadline, signed by midnight. Or what? I remembered Marlene's terrified whisper, "You do not know who Nathan owes." I grabbed the folder. I turned to run, but as I turned, I saw something on the floor by the open door. It was a cigarette butt. Aunt Viv didn't smoke. Nathan didn't smoke. Tessa vaped. I walked over and looked at it. It was crushed into the hardwood floor, a black smear of ash on the pristine varnish. It was a mark of disrespect, a territorial pissing. I looked out into the night. The ocean roared below, a chaotic, hungry sound. I realized then that I was trapped. If I signed, I became an accomplice to a crime ring. If I didn't sign, I was standing in the path of men who tracked people to courthouses and broke into homes to leave threats. I backed away from the door, clutching the folder to my chest. Compassion was gone. This wasn't about saving my family anymore. My family had opened the door and let the monsters in. I ran to the front door, locked it behind me, and sprinted to my car. I fumbled with the keys, dropped them, picked them up, and jammed them into the ignition. As I peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying, I looked in my rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw a figure standing at the edge of the property, by the old oak tree, a dark shape, motionless, watching me leave. I drove fast, my headlights cutting through the fog. I dialed Dana. "Answer, answer, answer," I chanted. She picked up. "Ellie?" "They were in the house," I said, my voice high and jagged. "They left a settlement offer, and a photo of me." "Dana, they are following me. Get to the police station," Dana said instantly. "Do not go to the motel. Go straight to the precinct." "I can't," I said. "Why?" "Because the settlement, it is not just for me," I said, realizing the implication of the timestamp. "The deadline is midnight. That is 3 hours from now. If I don't sign, they are trying to scare you. Ellie, it is a psychological tactic." "No," I said. "I saw the cigarette butt." "Dana, they were inside. They touched my things. This isn't a tactic. It is a countdown." I hit the highway, merging into traffic. I felt safer with other cars around me. But the image of the photo burned in my mind. "I am coming to your office," I said. "I am bringing the folder." "Ellie," Dana warned, "if you sign that—" "I am not going to sign it," I said, gripping the wheel. "Then what are you going to do?" "I am going to use it," I said. "They gave me a deadline? Fine. I will give them a show." I hung up. The fear was still there, cold and sharp in my stomach, but underneath it, the rage was hardening into something useful. They thought a scary photo and an open door would make me crumble. They thought I was still the nice niece, the quiet sister. They forgot that this was my house, and nobody breaks into my home and tells me when to leave. I pressed the accelerator, speeding toward the city lights, ready to turn their deadline into their downfall. I arrived at Dana's office 40 minutes after fleeing the beach house. I slammed the red plastic folder onto her desk, my breathing still ragged from the drive. They were inside. I said, "They left this." Dana looked at the folder, then at me. Her expression shifted from the calculated focus of a litigator to the sharp, alarmed intensity of a crisis manager. She opened the folder without touching it with her bare hands, using the end of a pen to lift the cover. She read the settlement agreement. Then she saw the photo. She went very still. "This was taken yesterday," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "From across the street. Look at the timestamp on the sticky note." I said, "Midnight. That is in 2 hours." Dana leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. She didn't look frightened. She looked furious. "This changes the complexion of the entire case," she said. "Up until now, we were treating this as a civil dispute involving fraud. This is intimidation. It is stalking. They are trying to bypass the legal system by terrorizing you into submission." She looked at me. "Did you touch the folder?" "Yes," I said. "I grabbed it. I panicked." "That is fine," she said. "But we are going to bag it. We are going to document it, and we are going to introduce it into the record. Not as a settlement offer, but as evidence of coercion." She picked up her phone and dialed the lead partner of her firm. "We need a videographer for the depositions tomorrow," she said into the phone. "And I want armed security in the lobby. No, I am serious. The opposition has escalated." She hung up and looked at me. "You are staying at a hotel tonight," she said. "A different one. Under my name. And tomorrow? Ellie. We are going to destroy them. They wanted to pressure you? They just handed us the hammer." The deposition room was air-conditioned to the point of freezing. A long, polished table separated me from the people who used to be my family. Nathan sat on the other side, flanked by his shiny-suited lawyer and a man I didn't recognize. A man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my car. That had to be Victor Rusk. The videographer adjusted his tripod. The court reporter flexed her fingers. We started with Nathan. He looked tired, but he had clearly been coached. He sat with his hands folded on the table, projecting an air of misunderstood benevolence. "Mr. Young?" Dana asked, placing a document on the table. "Did you, or did you not, access your sister's email account to send a message to yourself on October 24th? Nathan smiled. A tight, condescending smile. "I did not," he said smoothly. "My aunt's accounts were shared. We all had access. It was a chaotic time." Dana placed the metadata report on the table. "This is a forensic analysis of the email in question," she said. "It shows the email was created on a device registered to Young admin at 11:45 at night. The IP address corresponds to your co-working space in Seattle. Were you working late that night, Mr. Young?" Nathan blinked. He looked at his lawyer. "I work late often," he said, his voice losing some of its polish. "I am an entrepreneur." "So you admit you were at the computer?" Dana pressed. "I admit I was working." Nathan snapped. "I do not remember every email." Dana played the audio file from Grant's phone. Tessa's voice filled the room, shrill and panicked, claiming I was in a mental facility. Nathan's face reddened. "Is it your testimony, Mr. Young, that your sister was in a mental facility on the date this family authorization was signed?" Dana asked. Nathan shifted in his chair. Tessa gets emotional. She exaggerates. I cannot control what she says to realtors." "So she lied?" Dana asked. "She was trying to help," Nathan burst out. "Look, you are twisting everything. We had a verbal agreement. Ellie said she didn't want the house. She said it was a burden. I was just trying to execute her wishes." "By forging her signature?" Dana asked. "I had power of attorney," Nathan shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Which you also forged," Dana said, sliding the analysis of the signature across the wood. Nathan looked at the report. He looked at the red lines tracing the discrepancies in the loops and curves. "The consultant said it was standard practice," Nathan yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Victor Rusk. "He said it was an administrative bridge. He said as long as the intent was clear, the paperwork could be backfilled." Victor Rusk didn't flinch. He sat perfectly still, staring at a spot on the wall. "So you acted on the advice of Mr. Rusk?" Dana asked. "Yes," Nathan said, sweating now. "I am not a lawyer. Rusk handled the LLC. Rusk handled the notary. Ask him," Nathan had cracked. Under the pressure of the timestamps and the recording, he had abandoned the united front and thrown his co-conspirator to the wolves. Dana turned her attention to Victor Rusk. "Mr. Rusk," she said, "you are listed as the registered agent for Seabridge Legacy LLC. What is your relationship to the Young family?" Rusk turned his head slowly. His eyes were cold. Dead sharks. "I am a transition consultant," he said. His voice was gravelly and low. "I assist families in liquidating distressed assets. I was retained by Mrs. Marlene Young to facilitate a private sale." "Did you advise Nathan Young to sign his sister's name?" Dana asked. "Absolutely not." Rusk said, "I advise on structure, not execution. If the family provided documents that were irregular, that is a matter for them." Dana pulled out the trust amendment, the one with the missing witness signatures. "You prepared this document, didn't you?" Dana asked. "I provided a template," Rusk said. "And were you present when Vivian Young allegedly signed it?" Rusk paused. It was a fraction of a second, but it was there. "I was present at the residence to notarize other documents." He said, "I believe Mrs. Young signed the amendment in her bedroom. She was quite frail. She was concerned about the tax implications of the direct transfer." Dana smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Ms. Young," she said, looking at me. "Did Aunt Viv ever worry about taxes?" "Never." I said, "She didn't care about money. She cared about the ocean." Dana turned back to Rusk. "You just stated she was concerned about tax implications." Dana said, "But the amendment you templated doesn't mention taxes. It mentions equitable distribution. How would you know her specific concerns unless you were the one guiding her hand?" Rusk's eyes narrowed. "I recall a conversation," he said stiffly. "And I recall," Dana said, pulling a final piece of paper from her stack, "that your notary commission was revoked 4 years ago for fraud. So if you were notarizing other documents at the residence, Mr. Rusk, you were committing a felony." Rusk stood up. "I am done," he said. He walked out of the room. Nathan watched him go, his mouth hanging open. He looked at his lawyer, then at Marlene, who was sitting in the corner, weeping silently. "It is over, Nathan," I said from across the table. The next day. We were in court for the evidentiary hearing. The atmosphere was different. The judge had read the transcripts of the depositions. He had seen the metadata reports. He had seen the red folder with the threatening photo. I took the stand. "Ms. Young," the judge asked gently, "why do you believe your family went to these lengths?" I looked at the courtroom gallery. Marlene was looking at her hands. Nathan was staring at the floor, his leg bouncing nervously. "Because they thought I would let them," I said into the microphone. My voice was steady, but I felt a vibration deep in my chest. "They banked on my silence. In my family, we have a rule. You do not make a scene. You do not talk about money. You do not talk about addiction or debt or failure. You smile. You pass the potatoes, and you pretend everything is fine." I took a breath. My brother and my mother used that against me. They knew I would be embarrassed to drag this into court. They knew I would be humiliated to admit that my own mother stole from me. They thought my shame would be stronger than my spine. I looked at Marlene. She finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a tragic, hopeless love. But they forgot one thing. I continued. "They forgot that I am Vivian Young's niece, and she taught me that the truth is the only thing that doesn't wash away in the tide. I am not doing this for the money. Your Honor, I am doing this because if I let them sell this house, I am selling the only honest thing left in this family." The judge nodded slowly. He banged his gavel. "The court finds that the plaintiff has established a preponderance of evidence regarding fraud and forgery." The judge ruled, "The sale of 450 Ocean Drive is permanently enjoined." The deed transfer to Seabridge Legacy LLC is voided ab initio. He looked at Nathan. I am referring the matters of the notary stamps and the unauthorized practice of law to the State Attorney General's office. Mr. Young, I suggest you get very good criminal counsel. It was a victory, a total, crushing legal victory, but as I walked out of the courtroom, I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt like I had just watched my house burn down to save the foundation. Marlene was sitting on a bench in the hallway, sobbing into a handkerchief. I walked past her. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I would crumble. Nathan was waiting for me outside on the courthouse steps. He wasn't wearing his blazer anymore. He was in his shirt sleeves, and he looked smaller. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a jittery, feral fear. You think you won, he said. His voice was low, urgent. I did win. Nathan, I said, it is over. He shook his head, looking around the street as if expecting to see a black SUV. It is not over. Ellie, you stopped the sale, but you didn't stop the debt. That is your problem. I said, no, he said, stepping closer. You do not get it. The house was the payment. It was the collateral. Rusk. The people Rusk works for. They do not take IOUs. I remembered the photo, the deadline. Go to the police. Nathan. I said. He laughed. A dry, hopeless sound. Police cannot help me. I signed a contract. Ellie. A personal guarantee. If I do not pay, they take the next asset. What asset? I asked. You do not have any assets. Nathan looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine terror in his eyes. They will find one, he whispered. They always find one. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of the city. I drove back to Seabridge Cove alone. Grant Sutter was waiting for me in the driveway. He had the for sale sign in his trunk and a small box in his hand. He walked up to me as I got out of the car. He looked relieved, but also ashamed. Here, he said, handing me the box. I opened it. Inside were 2 shiny brass keys. I had the locks rekeyed this morning. Grant said, no keypads, no codes, just good, solid deadbolts. And I swept the house. No cameras, no bugs. It is yours. Ellie, thank you. Grant, I said. He scuffed his shoe against the gravel. I checked the deed again. He said quietly, after the deposition. I went back and pulled the original trust from 20 years ago. You know, just to be sure. And you were right, he said. Vivian never wavered. She listed you as the sole beneficiary in 2005, and she never changed it. She knew who you were, Ellie. And I should have known, too. I am sorry I doubted you. It is okay. Grant, I said, you did the right thing in the end. He nodded, got into his Range Rover, and drove away. I stood in the driveway, holding the keys. The wind was picking up, whipping the seagrass around my ankles. I walked up the steps and unlocked the door. The house was silent. The staging furniture was still there, the beige sofas, the fake art. But it felt different now. It felt like a stage set after the actors had gone home. I walked through the rooms, listening to the creak of the floorboards. I went into the kitchen. The red folder was gone. I had given it to the police. I walked upstairs to the study. This was where it had ended for Aunt Viv. This was where she had hidden her fear. I walked over to the vent in the floor, the old heating register near the window. In her notes, she had said, check the vent in the blue room. The study was painted a soft, robin's egg blue. I knelt down. The screws on the vent cover were loose. I used my fingernail to turn them. I lifted the grate. Inside, resting on top of the dusty ductwork, was a thick, cream-colored envelope. I pulled it out. It was heavy. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, and opened it. It wasn't a legal document. It was a letter. My darling Ellie, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the vultures have come. I am sorry to leave you with a war, but I knew you were the only one strong enough to fight it. I did not make the trust complicated by accident. I did not leave the amendment unsigned by mistake. I knew Marlene and Nathan were circling. I knew about the debt. Marlene thinks she hid it from me, but mothers always know. I structured the deed transfer to require a public recording because I wanted to force them into the light. I knew that if they tried to steal it, they would have to create a paper trail, and I knew that you, with your stubbornness and your eye for detail, would follow that trail. Do not hate your mother. She is weak, and fear makes people do terrible things. But do not save her, either. If you save her, she will never learn to stand. You are always the strong one. Ellie, that is why I left you the ocean. Because you are the only one who knows how to weather the storm. Be happy, be brave, and paint the kitchen yellow again. Love, Aunt Viv. I lowered the letter. Tears ran down my face, hot and fast. She had known. She had set a trap. Not to hurt them, but to protect me. She had turned the bureaucracy of the estate into a tripwire, knowing that Nathan's greed would trigger it and my persistence would disarm it. She had fought for me from the grave. I stood up and walked downstairs. I went out the back door and sat on the steps, looking at the ocean. The sun was setting, turning the water into a sheet of hammered copper. I had the house. I had the truth. I had the vindication. It should have felt like peace, but the silence was too loud. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I don't know why. Maybe I was expecting a text from Dana. Maybe I was expecting an apology from Marlene that would never come. The screen lit up. It was a notification from a real estate app I hadn't deleted yet. New pre-market listing alert. I frowned. I had set alerts for Seabridge Cove, but this address wasn't in Seabridge. 12 Maple Street, Seattle, WA. My heart stopped. That was Marlene's house, my childhood home, the house she had lived in for 40 years. I clicked the notification. It wasn't an official MLS listing yet. It was a coming soon teaser on a wholesale investment site. Distressed asset, quick close, cash only. I scrolled down to the contact information. Seller representative, Seabridge, Legacy LLC. Contact, nyoung, venturesgmail.com. I stared at the screen. They hadn't stopped. Nathan was right. The debt didn't go away. The sharks didn't swim away just because I put up a net. They just turned around and found easier prey. Nathan was selling Mom's house. He was going to liquidate the roof over her head to pay Rusk and the men in the black SUV. And Marlene? She would let him. She would sign the papers, teary-eyed and trembling, because she thought she was saving her son. I looked at the ocean. I looked at the keys in my hand. I was safe. I had won. I could put the phone down, delete the app, and spend the rest of my life painting the kitchen yellow and listening to the waves. I could follow Aunt Viv's advice. Do not save her. But then I thought about the broken casserole dish. I thought about Marlene's terrified whisper in the courtroom. They know where you live. If I walked away now, they would devour her. And once they were done with her. Once Nathan was desperate again. I looked at the contact email. Nyoung, Ventures. I pressed the button to call Dana. Ellie? She answered. Don't close the file. Dana, I said, staring at the gray water. Why? What happened? They are moving on Mom's house. I said, the LLC just listed it. Ellie, Dana said, her voice warning, that is not your property. You have no standing. If she wants to sell, she can sell. You have to let it go. I know I have no standing. I said, then what are you going to do? I stood up. The wind whipped my hair across my face. I am not going to sue them. Dana, I am going to buy the debt. What? If Apex Capital wants their money, I will give it to them. I said, my voice hard, I will take the lien, and then I will own the debt. And if Nathan wants to sell anything, he is going to have to go through me. Ellie, that is $1 million, Dana said. That is everything you have. I looked at the house behind me. Aunt Viv's fortress. I am not letting them win. I said, not against me, not against her. I hung up. I stared at the screen, at the picture of my childhood home marked as distressed. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to a new front. And this time, I wasn't waiting for them to strike first. Closing message. Thank you so much for listening to The Beach House Betrayal. This story of family deception, hidden debts, and the fight for legacy was a journey to write, and I hope it kept you on the edge of your seat. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Are you in a coastal town like Seabridge or a busy city like Seattle? Please leave a comment below in English and let me know your thoughts on Ellie's final decision. Did she make the right choice to keep fighting, or should she have walked away? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories so you never miss a new episode. We have many more tales of justice and retribution coming your way. Until next time.